Blog Talk Radio.
Up to 2012, there must be books that...
Now, lady, one of... Well, the reason that neither one of us know which one to talk first, because it's a team effort. I couldn't have done it without LA, and he's a marvelous host and talent and intellect on this program. And we decided we wanted to put a program together that would discuss and show and demonstrate the things that were happening around the world, all the earth changes and ancient prophetic texts that seem to be being fulfilled in our lifetimes. And once we got started in it, it kept unfolding and unfolding and unfolding, and we didn't know where it was going to stop. And it opened up a bunch of very interesting things that we didn't even know we were going to explore until after we got started.
Wow. You know, that reminds me of that great joke about the world, the optimist and the pessimist. You ever hear that one, guys? They get this boy, two boys, one's an eternal pessimist, one's an eternal optimist, and first off they take the pessimist into a room, and it's piled high to the ceiling with toys of every imaginable kind. And this kid just takes them all apart and just says, this is last year, this is the wrong color, this has got a problem, finds problems with everything. Then they go to the optimist, and they take him into another room. And in the center of the room is this 10-foot high pile of steamy hot horse manure. And the first thing this kid does is he scrambles up to the heap of the manure and starts digging for all he can. I mean, there's manure flying everywhere. And they stop him and they say, "What are you doing that for?" And he said, "You know, with this much manure, there's got to be a pony down there." Now, let me ask you guys, what are you guys finding here? Have you found a pony?
No, LA.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. What the pony is simply this, in my opinion. And let me add to what Richard's opening statement was. It was definitely a team effort. Richard and I are partners on Watchers 1, and I'm certainly on Watchers 2, and hopefully we'll get to Watchers 3 at some point. But it was a team effort, and it's just amazing what we uncovered. And I think what we uncovered was the fulfillment of ancient prophetic texts, which have sort of laid dormant for thousands of years, and for the most part really neglected by most people. I mean, most people, know about the American Idol and who's there, or Lindsay Lohan going to jail, or the antics of O.J. Simpson, or just Donald Trump not running for president. But most people don't study and sort of blow the dust off some of these ancient texts. And what we found, much to our astonishment, was that first of all, these texts are very deliberate. They're very in your face. In other words, you can look at the ancient writings there and interpret them without the need of an interpreter. When a person looks at Nostradamus, with all due respect to Nostradamians, it's like, well, they're kind of fuzzy quartrates, not sure it could mean anything. When we hear wars, rumors of wars, famines and pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, and troublesome times, and we use that sort of as our mantle to cover Watchers 2, lo and behold, that's exactly what we find in unprecedented ways. And certainly the numbers, I think, speak for themselves with the amount of earthquakes and earth changes that we're seeing, and there's a line sort of that we keep coming back to. Time, is it business as usual or something more? And I think both Richard and I certainly agree that it is something more.
So then, you guys are you coming to this as optimists or as pessimists? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that would say, well, it's doom and gloom, all right, but that doesn't sound like what you guys are doing here.
Well, no, what we're just trying to do is present the pieces of the puzzle and let the viewer put it together in any way that he chooses to. We just wanted to present the facts, just to lay them out there. But there definitely is something going on.
And
go ahead, Lynn.
If I can add one thing. I think I think we make a point that something is going on that seems to be related to these ancient texts, which immediately begs the question to the curious mind, gee, if these things are written down, who the heck wrote them? And, whoever wrote them, is this, whatever it is it benevolent or malevolent? Can we trust it? Is there more? And that's what we're trying to just gently kind of expose and say, hey, it's like, this is written, some of the stuff 2,000 years ago, other prophecies 2,600 years ago, and yet we see that the specificity is lining up in today's world. What's going on here, folks? Is someone outside the space-time continuum who can somehow see the future and call it out well in advance before it happens? How the heck do they do that? So I just find that's really fascinating.
Well, we know about the Bible prophecies, but there's also the Torah code angle. which is a new twist for a lot of people in terms of Bible prophecy. And so what are you finding there, Richard?
Well, it just seems to be continuing to unfold with new and even more startling discoveries all the time. And one thing that was rather chilling today, I worked for the past 24 hours with Rabbi Glazerson, who had a discovery of a Torah code that was so incredible that he flew in from New York just to meet with me. I said, this must be really important for him to come in just to spend 2 days together.
So give it to us. Give it to us.
Yeah. He, you might remember, for those of you who already are familiar with the Torah codes, there's a code in the first 5 books of the Old Testament known as the Torah. It's called equidistant letter sequencing. Basically, it's just that if you skip a certain amount of characters and it spells out words. Well, this has been perfected now over the past 25 years by a bunch of rabbis and professors, primarily in Jerusalem and New York, of which I know most of the world experts that do this and are good friends with all of them at this point. It's something I never expected or anticipated. But back on September 12th of 2001, the day after the attack on the Twin Towers, Eliyahu Refs, who's basically considered the discoverer of the computer Torah codes, came up with a table that talked about the towers and bin Laden and all of that. And in the background, what often happens in Torah codes that most people don't know is there's something called the plain text. And the plain text is just the actual scripture that's in the background that normally you don't pay any attention to. Well, all of the codes, Twin Tower, terrorism, all of that, all built like a little crossword puzzle over this scripture that said, and 3,000 men died, or words to that effect. And basically, it's the scripture in the book of Genesis where it talks about Sodom and Gomorrah and how all of the approximately that many men died. Well, what was interesting, all of the codes for the Twin Towers ended up appearing superimposed over that text. And we didn't know for, I don't know, what was it, guys, 2 months or so after 9/11, how many people actually were murdered.
Right.
But it turned out to be something like 2,998 or 97 people. So practically 3,000 people. So meanwhile, the Torah code told us the day after how many people would be killed. And then what was really interesting is that they found a bin Laden code a while back. It happens to be in Torah code promo that's on your website, Marshall. And it said, you know, bin Laden, destruction, you know, it says, you know, the Messiah will revenge, you know, all of that. Well, in that same table, Rabbi Glazerson found a slew of other related words, and it said, surely he will be shot in 5771, which is this year. All of those words just appeared. And then in the plain text under all of that, they discovered it said murderer will murder, murderer, 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 over and over, called him a murderer. And then it had a note about it's just there were so many bin Laden notes and paraphrase it, and I should send you the completed table because we just finished it, and it took literally 3 pages, 3 screens of the computer edited together in Photoshop to see the whole table because it was so enormous. It was just like stunning. And then we found
how
a
often do you see
table.
something like this, Rick? How often do you see it?
We've never seen a table this large.
So bin Laden gets big play.
He got
Does
big
it mention
play.
anything? Does it mention anything about a possible successor?
No, it doesn't. But what's interesting is, here's the most interesting thing, and I asked Glazerson that's something he hadn't thought of either. And we always are bouncing ideas off of each other. And Glazerson is a world expert in ancient Hebrew. But both he and Professor Ehrlich had sent me tables on the Japan nuclear crisis. And one of them said meltdown, Japan, 5771 this year, and all of that. And we had seen those tables before. So then he started telling me how many times in the Torah the word destruction appeared in relation to Japan. And it was only one time, and it all was about the nuclear disaster that they're having. So I said, that's it? There are no others? He said, no. I said, does this mean that we're coming to the end of what things are going to be destroyed? And it's something that neither one of us thought about, because the Torah code always just seemed endless before. But now it's like, that's it.
That's it.
So,
well, Lynn, are you seeing correlations to this?
It was rather chilling.
What was that question, Mark?
Are you seeing correlations to this elsewhere in any other ancient texts?
Well, look, I would say that all of this dovetails together absolutely and is weaving a very grim tapestry. But nonetheless, that's where we are. I mean, I wish we weren't here. I mean, I wish we were talking about Winnie the Pooh or something, but we're not. I mean, this stuff is real. That's the whole point of Watchers 2, is to shake people, wake people up. It's an hour long, and it's just packed with so much information. And what we're trying to show is that, guys, it's not business as usual. We are in unprecedented times. When we just start hopping around the world, and we sort of do this in Watchers 2, although certainly in a much different way than what we're doing here. But when we look at, let's just say last summer, we start off with the 500 fires in Russia, which impacts the grain, which impacts the commodities, the 1,000-year flooding in Pakistan. We look at the droughts in India. We look at the droughts in Africa. We look at the tsunami in Japan, or the flood of biblical proportions, CNN's words, not mine, in Australia. We look at the Christchurch earthquake, the Haitian earthquake. There's still 1 million people living in tents. The Chilean earthquake. And we hear like the Earth has been moved off its axis. Magnetic north has shifted. The anomalies of the moon. We see thousands of birds and fish just dying, pods of dolphins, hundreds of whales, millions upon millions of fish washing up here in Southern California, and on it goes. And look, I'm 60 years old. I've lived on the planet a while. I've never seen anything like this. It's one thing to see one event. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, but they're still cleaning up from the BP oil spill, which is certainly a troublesome time. I actually had a prophetic vision of that weeks before it happened, and then watched it on the news. About fell out of my chair. It was exactly what I had dreamt. I don't get a lot of these. I've only had 2, and one was the BP oil spill. The other one was some sort of flooding of Southern California, which has not happened yet either. So we'll see what happens with that. But we start plugging in like the volcanic. I'm sorry,
Lynn. Anything on with Mississippi? I mean, now we're flooding towns to save cities.
There you go.
I mean, I've never seen this.
I've never seen anything like it ever.
Yeah, we're about to say
rivers. We're saying it's flowing backwards, as the tributaries can no longer feed into it, and it's just kind of spilling out over the land now.
Yeah, I've spoken to several people up and down the river, and it's nasty. I mean, it's really, really nasty. And it's just like over the weekend, the third Intifada happened. I blogged about it on my blog all last week. All last week I dedicated the whole week because of the Arab Spring and the uprising, and how all this, the prophecies of ancient texts hinge around Israel, believe it or not. And one of the things I noticed that the media didn't cover anything about the Intifada until Sunday. And then all of a sudden it became front page news for about the 12 hours, and then it just sort of went away. What most people don't understand, nothing has gone away. It's only just kind of reared back and retreated. At some point they will go at it, and who knows how horrific it will be. But it's nasty, and all this was prophesied literally thousands of years ago. It's mind-numbing, mind-blowing to actually turn on the news and sit there and go, oh my gosh, I'm looking at something that was written 2,600 years ago, and here it is, in living color in my living room. It's not business as usual.
I asked Glaserson about the Intifada. Of course, Glaserson is a rabbi. He's the guy I've been telling you about that's an ancient text expert. And I said, so what about the Intifada? What about that? And he said, oh, the Kabbalah speaks to that all the time. I said, what does the Kabbalah say? He said, it's the continuing and ongoing battle between Ishmael and Israel, Ishmael being the Arabs. I mean, this is something that hasn't changed in thousands of years.
This is the mother of all Hatfield and McCoy kind of situations.
Yeah.
It's a great way to put it.
You got that right.
I mean, it's going on.
The moon anomaly was something that we had, that LA and I had just started on the project, and then it kind of happened. I noticed that you had sent a note to everyone today about the moon anomaly, and that's something that really captured my attention. I couldn't understand what was going on, and no one was discussing it.
What caught my attention with the moon anomaly more than the anomaly itself, which to me was stunning, the videography that you did for Watchers 2 is unique. I mean, it's in-your-face video when people see it. And, and yes, this is something that happened during the equinox. And so people are going, well, gee, what's happening? Well, now it's changed. But for a while there was a major change, which you videographed, and particularly with the kind of cameras. So I would like for you to just tell everybody, because this is what the show's really titled for, is what you witnessed with the moon during the equinox and how you documented it for watchers too, so that people, if they get the video, they can look at it and see for themselves.
Richard?
Well, it's kind of, I could tell you a little bit of the background to it, because it was the evening that I noticed the moon looked like that. I had just dropped off a bunch of Watchers 1s for LA, and maybe was taking him to his house. And so I was driving back on the 101 freeway, and it just so happened that the direction I was going, back towards Hollywood, the moon rose right over the center of the freeway, right in the middle of my windshield. And it looked really weird and spooky. I mean, it was like cut off halfway up, so it was like there was a horizontal line through it, and I didn't recognize any of the surface areas on the bottom of the moon that I was used to seeing.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what happened? This is not the moon I've seen my entire life. So I go home, I turn on the news, nobody's talking about it, there's not a single thing on it, and I'm thinking, what, am I going crazy? I know the moon looks different. This is really strange. Did something happen during the equinox? Because that was the night before, if you remember. That was what was that, the 20th of December, I guess? The equinox? 21st of December. Well, naturally, there was nothing anywhere on the internet anywhere, but you know where it was? It was on YouTube. And there was already 4 or 5 home videos that people had put up about the moon asking questions. What's wrong with the moon? Why does it look like this?
Yeah, all
exactly.
Different locations.
From all over the country, people were putting up, some of the videos were really terrible. They weren't even zoomed in, so you could hardly, just saw like a white speck in the sky, cut off at a weird angle, but you couldn't really see anything. But still, you could hear in their voices, they were worried about it. And so I told them.
I mean, it was, I looked at these videos, and I'm going, whoa, what is happening here? But, you know, what really caught my attention was the way the moon shadow was moving. And that, you know, instead of going, you know, sideways, it was rolling under and around.
Yeah, that was very abnormal. And so there was actually 2 different things happening. There was an actual physical rotation of the moon surface. And then the shadow, or they call it the terminator of the moon, was also doing very strange things. Any almanac, and it was supposed to be like vertical, and it was horizontal.
Get this, when Richard and I were doing this, and we were, okay, so we you know, Richard thinks something's up. I'm looking at the video he's showing. We got a red camera, went up to a secret location and filmed the rising of the moon, and then we A/B things. Okay, we know something's up. We get that.
Okay,
but we're not sure.
Okay,
we're not
Lynn, before you introduced a couple of terms, red one and A-being things. These are video terms, and I think it's really important for the listeners out there.
Richard, I'll let you address the red camera. Go ahead.
And then let's get back to you on your.
Okay.
Well, there's a camera that's used out here in Hollywood called the Red 1 camera, and essentially it's used for making digital motion pictures, like the movie Knowing with Nicolas Cage was shot on the Red camera, and many other movies lately. And it's a trend now to not use film anymore, but to shoot digitally, either to a hard disk or to solid-state media. And this camera has what's known as a CMOS chip that's really huge. It's as big as a 35-millimeter negative. So it captures 4,000 pixels wide images. So I know a guy that owns one, and I called him up and said, hey, look, we want to rent your camera, and all we want to do is put it on the roof of this building in Hollywood and shoot the moonrise. He goes, no problem. So Gianni comes over with this camera, takes a half hour just to put it all together and set it up, get the tripod out, mount all the pieces, get it working. And so he had this really big lens that we put on the front of it. So essentially we got, with all of the extensions he had and everything, a 1,000-millimeter lens. And because what I wanted to do was, I found a picture of the moon that was taken by a photographer named Jérôme. He was a French guy that was in Winchester, New York, and took a 35-millimeter still picture of the moon while it was in partial eclipse. And there were a lot of people that did that. It looks kind of reddish. I'm sure you've seen those pictures during the equinox when the moon was partially eclipsed. It just looks red. And he took one, and I pulled it off the internet and looked at it. And then I compared it with the shot that I had taken of the moon, just with a cheap little camera. I'm going, well, it doesn't match. My shot's in a different position than the moon is. And what I mean by that, it was actually the moon's surface didn't match. So that's when I suggested to LA that we should get a really good camera, no-nonsense camera, and go up there and shoot it with as high a resolution as we could muster, and then compare it with these high-resolution still frames. And when I got it back and digitized all the stuff into the computer and put them in After Effects, and basically I did a transparency test where I made them both, I scaled them so they're both the same size, and I put one moon on top of the other moon and put them at 50% opacity so I could see through one of the frames, and realized when I rotated in there that it was out of phase 135 degrees. It had spun that far.
Whoa.
All that brings us to this. So now we have something. You know, obviously something is up. We're not sure what it is. We're not scientists, and we're trying to vet it. So we call Griffith Observatory. I call, Richard calls. All we're trying to do is just talk to some folks. You know, will you come on the record? Can we, you know, what about this? Basically, no answer. They flatly refuse us. We called the Jet Propulsion.
I had a phone number for Griffith Observatory, you know, here in Los Angeles, just to the right of the Hollywood sign. And I asked them, I said, look, we have a bunch of young people on YouTube, and we're doing a science program, so to speak, and we just have some questions about the moon. It looks different, and people would like to know what's going on. And the guy that talked to me said, we're just not interested in that. I said, you're an observatory and you're not interested in the moon? He said, no, we're not. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. And he clicked, and he hung up on me.
And we found the same goodwill at UCLA, Pepperdine University, and the Jet Propulsion Lab. No one would speak to it. No, we couldn't find anybody. I mean, it's not like we're, you know, hey, all we want to do is ask a few questions. And I nosed around on the internet, and of course that led to all sorts of goose chases and talking to different people. And I had people, oh, there's nothing wrong, everything's fine, and well, you know, the moon's out of phase, you know, it does sort of this type of thing over an 8-year cycle or whatever. But we couldn't get anyone to address it. Finally, Richard discovers this paper, this really obscure paper by an Italian scientist called Dr. Iorio. And I emailed the man, and the title of the paper is The Eccentricity of the Lunar Surface. And all
from Cornell University.
Yeah, and it was posted on the Cornell University's website. So, and we vetted that. We were able to email him, talk to him about it, and all he was saying, the bottom line, and we use this in Watchers too, was that, okay, something's up here. Not sure what it is, but the moon's acting in a very odd way. So it was just a fascinating segment, and of course that's in Watchers too. And again, to me, this is a sign in the heavens. This is not business as usual. And, you know, it'd be one thing, see, Marshall, it was just one sign. If it was just the moon and nothing else, we'd go, okay, well, that's interesting. But see, it's the moon, and then it's the sun, and then it's the tsunami and the floods and the earthquakes and the fires, and on it goes, and the bird deaths and the fish deaths, and it's off the hook. And the wars and the rumors of wars.
And very science. You know, that's the thing, guys. When you were telling me that, and particularly with Griffith Observatory, now I will tell you, I did post an article on Yowza.com about a year or so ago, and they were actually trying to subvert the discussion on Nibiru, because now what I'm seeing is a disinformation tactic, is that they changed the spelling of the name. So instead of it being what everyone else is doing, it's like Nibiru or something else. And
ancient spelling.
And then either an ancient spelling or just something that is, you know, it's none of the above, but the way they spelled it took it to, on a Google search, if anyone saw that and just reading an article from Griffith Observatory would go, which was actually quoted in the LA Times, and those were the guys that we really took after, was the LA Times. But if you took that keyword, did a search on it, you would get to a whole bunch of pages that would come up with pure cruddy debunking, you know, outright propaganda. And I called them on that, nailed them on it. So, I mean, the Griffith Observatory, just in the Planet X discussion, is already feeding disinformation, or let's be kind, let's call it misinformation. And, of course, the LA Times, like a faithful parrot, is going squawk, 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 and they're just putting it right out. No wonder people have a hard time sorting through all this stuff. But, you know, so I wouldn't expect Griffith Observatory to be forthcoming with you about something like what's happening with the moon during the equinox. But all of the other sources, I mean, man, that's a heavy hand clamping the discussion. What do you think, Lynn?
Well, it was interesting. I mean, I spent like 2 weeks calling different people at Pepperdine University, leaving messages. Not one return phone call, not one. over and over, just calling every day, being a pest, being a news hound, trying to get story. Just got some questions. We're working on a film. You just have a couple of questions about the eccentricity of the moon. Just want to answer some questions. Call the next day. Not one return phone call. UCLA, I basically got a really nasty response from a professor there who just led me down some rabbit trail, and that was the end of it. Without that paper from Dr. Iorio, it was really interesting because this is an obscure little site on Cornell University. And at least somebody went on the record, and we were able to email him, establish communication link with him, and thank him for his paper. And of course, we used the bottom line of the paper, basically saying that it's not business as usual. There is something up with the moon, and it needs further investigation. You see, what amazes me is almost like a deliberate obfuscation that our media does to keep people away from. Like we talked about the Mississippi, and Richard was saying that the tributaries are running backwards, which they are. This is nasty stuff, and people go, oh, well, it's not as bad as the 37 or the 27 flood or whatever it was. And, we don't know that yet. It hasn't crested yet. And it's still, in some ways, catastrophic. And what we see is that these, in 2010, I started really monitoring this. I felt like something had shifted. And I blogged about it in the late fall of 2009. I felt like something had shifted. And sure enough, 2010, it started. And what I mean by that is we were seeing 7.0 or greater earthquakes happening almost about every 10 to 15 days. Now we're seeing it, I would say, between 5 and 15 days. I mean, it's almost one a week, a 7.0 someplace on the planet. And what's amazing, you talk about troublesome times, and that's sort of a broad, umbrella to be under for disasters. But what we see is with the BP oil spill, the effects of that have impacted, and I know you talked about this, we talked about it last time I was on, the idea of the Gulf Stream stalling. Did it stall for a period of time? Is it affecting our weather? And now we understand from the tsunami that even before the tsunami hit, the reactor in Japan, Fukushima reactor, apparently was compromised. So, they've known about this for weeks, and now they're just starting to let it out. So how much of a Chernobyl-like incident really happened? How much of that has already blown through the west coast of the United States? What are we really looking at here? And what we see are these disasters stacked one upon the other. The prophecies call these the birth pangs, which is really interesting. And of course, that refers to when a woman gives birth, we see the contractions happen greater and greater and greater, and finally, it gives, the woman gives birth. And that's what I think.
It's a rather sudden process when it happens, too.
Yeah, and a lot of ugly looks like you did this to me, USOB. But I think you're really hitting on to this because the whole concept of the contractions and how there's a compression of the contractions is what stuns me. I tell the audience that when you do this kind of work, you start getting premonitions. You just get into it. You start to feel it. You start to sense things coming on. In my case, what will happen is I get very heavy premonitions before a major natural disaster, and which will always have a loss of life. And the first one was Sumatra superquake and tsunami back in December 2004, again in Katrina, Haiti, several others. It always, when I get these premonitions, I know what I'm dealing with. I know how I have to address it. I don't know where it's going to happen, other than it'll happen within about 4 weeks of when I have that. And last week, I had a very heavy premonition along the lines that I had with Katrina, before Katrina struck. And, and I shared that with Lynn, and I shared it with some other folks. And wow, what was amazing to me is how many people were reporting back that they were having the same experience. And I'd like for you guys to talk a little bit about that.
Well, we all kind of have this gut feeling that something's about to happen. We don't know what. It makes you kind of reevaluate life and what things are really important.
And I would add to that I've been in the last several months, the last month and a half, whatever, been telling people close to me that, and look, I know it can sound really crazy to people, but I keep saying I live in Southern California. And I told my wife and my daughter and some very close friends, I said, what I think is when this earthquake hits, you will be overwhelmed by the violence of it, that we've never experienced anything even remotely like this. And the violence will stun us when it hits. And, at that point I told them, you need to call out. You need to call out. to the guy up above for protection when it hits. And there's almost, I kind of walk around, and I know this sounds crazy, but I kind of walk around almost expecting it on a daily basis. I don't know what's coming, Marshall. I haven't seen it. I had one prophetic dream, which is the BP oil spill. I saw that extremely vividly. I was there. And it followed several months later, 6 or 8 months later, by another very, very vivid prophetic dream. And I know the house of which it is, and the waters. It was a 2-story house on the beach in Malibu. And I walked in, and the water is already, on the 2nd floor. And I said, "How bad is it?" And this man tells me it's up over the rafters on the 1st floor. And we throw open the blinds, these shutters, and we look out at the Pacific Ocean, and it's absolutely raging, just raging. Now, I haven't seen that yet, and I hope I don't. But nonetheless, I feel something is coming. Something is coming to California. I really hope I'm wrong.
Marshall, did you want examples of prophetic dreams people seem to be having and impressions?
Yes, if we could share that with listeners, I think it'd be helpful, because I'm sure that there's a bunch of them out there that are having that. I sure get a lot of reports of this in my email box, where folks are they're talking about their feelings, their sensations. And to me, the most important thing is not, who's right, who's wrong, what's your batting record, because that's all ego and it's gamesmanship nonsense. I think what's really important is people are sensing something. We're connected to, there are those that believe consciousness only resides inside the brain matter, and then there are folks like myself who believe that the consciousness exists outside of the brain, and that it connects us in ways that other people like Stephen Hawking won't acknowledge. And more people, follow in that walking way. It's just the problem is that they get so easily humiliated by a very acrimonious few who are saying, you need Prozac. Let's be intelligent here. Those kind of things that really humiliate the conversation. And I want them to understand. And because one thing that is definitely
a gift.
They're receiving a gift, and it's getting more difficult to trick them out of understanding that. For example, I want you to think back in the last couple of years on news reporting, and one of the hackneyed responses with this compression of natural events is that they always were saying, it's still business as usual. The only reason why it seems like there's more of these events is that we're better at reporting them.
Baloney.
No,
baloney.
afraid not.
And it's the result of that is it's difficult for the people who are having these feelings and sensations to understand that they're not alone. They're not isolated, that there's more people like them than they could possibly imagine. And I see these numbers increasing all the time. So guys, what's your take on everyone having these sensations and feelings?
Well, I could give you a couple examples that I thought were interesting because they happened to ordinary people. They weren't like anybody that was high in status or some kind of guru or preacher or anything like that. These were like very normal people, including myself. It happened to. About a year and a half or so ago, I was been working long hours, and I laid down in the afternoon just to take a nap for 30 minutes. Thought I'd feel a little better if I did, and I closed my eyes and went to sleep, and I dreamed that I was laying in the bed I was laying in. It wasn't that I was actually thinking I was somewhere else. It was a dream that I was sleeping there. And I had plantation shutters in this house. And in my dream, I looked over, and I noticed the room was starting to vibrate. The plantation shutters were vibrating and kind of clacking against each other. And then the bedroom started to move and undulate. And then the shutters flew open, and extremely bright shafts of light came through the windows. Now, this was like at a time where it was post-twilight. It was like almost dark outside. It was, well into starting, the sun had set and had been set for some time. And so it was very weird to have really bright sunlight streaming into the room. And I remember feeling that I was flying forward in my bed until it tickled my stomach, is the only way I can describe it. It was almost like going down an unexpected drop in a hill in your car really fast, and your stomach tickles. That's what it felt like in my dream. And I woke up and was talking to myself and saying, "Oh my God." And I felt like flushed and just kind of frightened out of my mind because in my dream the sun had come up at night. And I couldn't understand why that had happened. Well, I mentioned it to a friend of mine, and he said, I had the same dream. I mean, not exactly like mine, but he said, I had a dream where the sun came up at night, and it scared me to the point where I woke up, and he said, I knew it wasn't good. It really frightened me, and I broke out in a cold sweat. Well, then a month or two after that, I was talking with just a guitarist friend of mine who came up to watch Watchers 1 with me. I was working on Watchers 1, so it was probably about 5 months ago that I talked to him. And he's a really good guy, and he plays guitar really well. He does a lot of album work. And he proceeds to tell me this dream without much coaching or prodding, and says, I was standing out on Franklin Avenue. It's this place where we all kind of hang out sometimes at night. There's a bunch of restaurants and a coffee shop there. Then I was talking to my friends on Franklin Avenue. It was nighttime, and all of a sudden, it was daytime. And he said, I knew it wasn't a good thing. So this is a guitarist that also had the same dream. It's almost like Close Encounters, where everybody's seeing the mountain in their dreams and in their visions, and they were kind of drawn to this thing. So I wondered, are there any ancient texts, are there any scriptures to talk about such a thing? And as far as the sun coming up at night, I don't know, but there is a scripture in Isaiah chapter 30 in the Old Testament that talks about the sun being 7 times brighter, and that the light of the moon would be as bright as the light of the sun. And I've always wondered about that. And juxtapositioned in that same text, it talks about when the towers fall. It's like, what? And this isn't in any Torah code or anything like that. You could just open this up and read it for yourself. And I'm thinking, okay, for some reason, the Twin Towers falling was some kind of benchmark, some kind of, and maybe LA would have some thoughts about that as well, but it seems to me that after that happened, something shifted, something changed.
Wow. Guys, I have one question that just came in on the virtual studio, and one of the folks was asking, when is Watchers coming out, and where can they buy a copy?
Let me take that. We are in production on that right now, and we should probably get them next week. We should be shipping by middle of next week, hopefully, Wednesday or Thursday of next week. The best place to buy it is lamarzulli.net, www.lamarzulli.net. It's very self-explanatory. One-click shopping, go to PayPal, and bam, there it is. So that's the place to get it right now, lamarzulli.net, and we will be shipping sometime next week as soon as we get them back to the manufacturer.
They're in replication right now. The show is finished and mastered, and I'm just waiting for the DVDs to be pressed. And then they also should be available on Amazon too, right, Lynn?
Yeah, it will be available on Amazon. The only reason why we have not listed that, again, we need product in our hand before we push it to Amazon. But we're hoping next week, sometime next week, to actually start shipping them out.
Great. And just to all of those of you that are in the virtual studio, I mean, the chat room has got a huge number of guests, and I'm sure you folks that are coming in as guests have questions. You'll need to get your Blog Talk Radio account set up, and that's free. And then you'll be able to come on in and ask questions besides just lurking the chat room. And what I see right now, the dialogue that's going on, is people are talking about the moon is just seeming to move around. It's not where they used to find it. So perhaps this, fellows, this shift in the moon that you saw during the equinox was one part of it, but there's still, it's not where it's settled down, that there's still something going on. Are you seeing any evidence of that? Now, let me throw that to L.A.
Well, we have, other than the initial evidence that we, uncovered or sort of investigated in Watchers 2, I have personally not heard of any other anomalies with the lunar surface. I mean, once it happened, I look up at it all the time. When we had that, what was it? I think you shot a picture of it, Richard. The very large full moon over Hollywood was really ominous a few months back when it was very, very close to the Earth. But I have not seen anything that I would say is anomalous, at least not right now.
I think. Well, the only thing I might add to that is that the rotational stuff that the moon was doing seems to have subsided. It seems to be back to where the man on the moon looks like a man on the moon. But the shadows, to me, seem to still be sometimes not where I would expect them to be. But I don't know what's normal for it this time of year. So I don't want to raise any kind of alarm, not being an astronomer, and say that the shadows aren't correct, because maybe they are for this time of year, but I don't remember them doing what they've been doing before. I guess I'm more heightened and aware of what the moon looks like now than I've ever been before, but it doesn't seem to be rotating like it was. Now, whether it's coming up, where it's supposed to come up on the horizon, I noticed that some YouTube people have said the moon's totally not where it's supposed to be when it comes up. They're used to seeing it come up like in a specific spot on their land, and it's not doing that. Now, I don't know if after the equinox has subsided and all that, if it's gradually coming back and responding to where it normally comes up or not. I don't have the answers to that one, Marshall. But it seemed that that the equinox did something. Maybe it was the alignment of everything at once put stresses on it, or maybe it was a Planet X phenomena. I don't know. In fact, what I thought was interesting, L.A. was just talking about Lorio, the guy that was sent our way, that wrote the Cornell University paper. He'd written several other white papers that asked the question, could another planet be perturbing the moon? And he asked those in several other white papers and never had an answer for that. And I don't know if they still have an answer, but there seem to be more interesting white papers coming out of Cornell University on all of these things.
Yeah, and there's a question that's popping up here in the virtual chat room that would the solar flares affect the moon, or is this an Earth wobble situation? Have you guys seen any speculation or thoughts at Cornell or any other site like that?
Lynn?
Richard?
I think it's a good question. I just don't know. I don't know what to say to that, to answer that. It is interesting to me that while the moon was doing that, we ended up with what most people are calling a 10-degree magnetic pole shift that's indeed occurred on the Earth to the point where they've had to renumber runways and airports all over the country. That we know is indeed happened, and that was even on CNBC. So that's like a documented thing. And then I heard that there was at least a 2-degree Earth shift of the Earth's actual axis, a physical axis shift, because of the 9.0 earthquake in Japan. Now,
that's interesting. We've got Lisa DNRN, and her note in the virtual room is, and the Earth is in a different position now. The axis has shifted. Remember, the sun appeared 2 days early in one of the northern countries. Yeah,
right.
And, the explanation that it was global warming melting the ice, let's take a vote on that one. Does anybody, who gives it the raspberry? I do.
It's just
when I read that the global warming guys were saying, well, this is proof of global warming. Let me get this straight. The ice shelf melted hundreds of feet, so we would see the sun come up 2 days earlier. When I posited that to Dr. Roger Lear, who's on camera, he just says balderdash, and he shakes his head. It's just a great moment. That's in Watchers too. It just amazes me. All these things are happening, on our planet, and yet most people, when you just even try to talk about it with the average guy on the street, it's like they get the deer in the headlight look. It's like, oops, don't want to go there. Let's talk about American Idol or whatever. It's amazing.
It's amazing, guys.
It's all just scientific stuff. It's like, well, what if? It's like, why is that so preposterous? I mean, we don't know nearly as much as we should know about our own universe, and even our solar system.
When is it a crime to ask a question? I thought that's what science was, right? Asking questions.
Exactly.
Is it ever a bad question? Of course not. I want to add one thing to the magnetic pole shift. When it first came out, and I was nosing around, the story that got legs was the Tampa airport. The Tampa was going to have to realign its runways, just one of many airports that have to do that. Not the runways itself, but the numbers on the runways.
Yeah, just the numbers.
Where north is, right? So, I nose around, and I finally called down to the Tampa airport, and I got an official on the phone, and I said, well, what's going on? Is this normal? Oh, yeah, this happens all the time. Well, how long have you worked there? 27 years. Have you ever seen it happen like this? Well, no. So see, it's like it's just double talk. Oh, it happens all the time. But you've been there 27 years, and you've never had to realign the runways. So is it really business as usual? And again, I keep bringing this back to this because it's so important for people to get it. We've jumped around from topic to topic to topic. And if it was just one of these things, well, okay, let's go back and watch the tube or cheer our favorite team on or whatever. But see, it's a whole rapid succession of events, and it never lets up. This week it's the Mississippi River. On the weekend it was El Akba, or the Day of Catastrophe, and and now it's like back over to Japan with the reactor. It's just non-ending. I've never seen it this tenuous, this tumultuous.
Yeah, but something, we know a lot more about Casey Bono and Schwarzenegger's illegitimate son or his daughter, whichever.
That's it.
It's like
sending the clowns.
Yeah, sending the clowns. It's always the same thing. People say, well, show us the proof, show us the proof. And there it is right in front of your face. And no, I don't see it. I don't see it. It's like you come home and you find your spouse in bed with someone else, and your spouse says, don't believe your lying eyes. And you go, okay. And you walk away. And the strange thing is that's what people do.
Well, the burning question remains, will Lindsay Lohan really have to do prison time?
Richard, I lay awake at night and ponder that. I really do. And this is, we're joking about it, but it's, in my opinion, it's deliberate obfuscation. And you'll also notice something else, and this will sound incredibly conspiratorial, but you just do your own little research. Go into any restaurant and listen to the music that's being played. Go anywhere. Start listening to the music that is playing over the loudspeakers in different places that you visit in the course of a week. Take a little pocket notebook or whatever, or on your iPhone or whatever, or just type in some notes. What you'll find is that they play songs that we've heard hundreds and hundreds of times, and there's a reason for it, because it's like it soothes the population. I know this sounds incredibly conspiratorial, but hear me out. It's like, oh, it's okay. Everything was okay when that song was being played. It's okay. I know the song. It's all familiar. It's all good. And that's why the useful idiots, like a few weeks ago, it was Charlie Sheen. It was, look at Charlie. He's crazy. Look how crazy it is. And now it's, the Governator, and then we're going to watch his infidelity, and that'll get news legs and keep people distracted. Meanwhile, and I blogged about this morning on the blog, a little off topic, but it's all related, Marshall. In Indiana, they decided that, guess what? It's okay to knock down your door without a search warrant or probable cause. Isn't that lovely? So say goodbye to the Fourth Amendment in Indiana, unless the people of Indiana rise up, and I certainly hope that they do. Otherwise, you might as well just start licking the jackbooted thugs who decide to break down your door for no probable cause at all at 2 in the morning. And this goes back, of course, to the Magna Carta, where a man's home, however humble, is his castle. And that's what our Fourth Amendment right is there in the Constitution. And yet these positivists it doesn't matter, natural law, heck with it, heck with the Constitution, we're going to legislate what we want to do. And this is borderline, this is no longer soft tyranny, this is hard tyranny, and it borderlines on a fascist state, in my opinion.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. And it's, I find it interesting. We're at the top of the hour here, and what I'm going to do, folks, is just take a little break here. So if anybody needs to run off real fast, you got a couple of minutes. And I want to play a little music for everyone, and then we'll be back from that. It'll last about 2 minutes. It's Woody Guthrie, and this was recorded back in the 40s. But this is carryover Depression-era music. And are you there with me, Lynn and Rick?
You certainly am.
Here.
Okay, and we had one fellow, it was a scratchy connection and he dropped out, but he asked a very interesting question. He knew that you guys were following what was happening in Israel with the UFO that was over the Dome of the Rock.
Yeah.
And I think, I believe that's in Watchers 2.
Correct.
Or is it Watch? Yeah, that's right.
Watchers 2.
So there's been an awful lot of controversy. His question specifically was, are all those videos hoaxes? So there it is. What do you think?
Well, let me run with this one, Rich, and then I'll pass it back to you. There are a number of videos, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. For starters, 1 and 2 is of the same in the same area, looking at the dome. We brought in a videographer, someone who works in special effects in Hollywood, to look at all these different videos, and we have his comments in Watchers too. Now he believes with, I forget what percentage, it's like a 60 to 40 or 65, 35% certainty that the whole thing is a hoax. However, there's still that doubt where he's really not sure. Number 3 is definitely a hoax. Everyone pretty much agrees on that. Then it gets into 4, 5, and 6. They're different shots of the same phenomena. And this gentleman, Tyler, tells us as he's looking at it that this is difficult to do, but nonetheless could be certainly in a post-production. And what gives it away, according to him, is the stretch when the object that's over the dome disappears. It's what's called a stretch, and you can see that, and it's different from the rest of the film. So, look, I'm a believer. I've written books about this. I talk about it all the time. In fact, Watchers 1 was UFOs are real burgeoning and not going away. But we also attempt to vet some of this, and we know that the Jerusalem UFO was an event that needed to be vetted, and so we brought in Tyler, and he gave us his expert opinion as to what he thinks it is. Rich, why don't you pick it up from there?
Sure. No, I think that, in my personal opinion, and I could be wrong, but after examining these things a lot, first of all, Camera 3 is definitely a hoax. It was basically torn apart by a number of people, even on YouTube, and by myself and by Tyler. And it was basically a still frame of an image which is readily available on the internet of Israel at night, shot with a star filter so that the lights were kind of flared out, you know. And so this object comes down twinkling over the top of that, and it looks like that the still image was put on a widescreen monitor and shot with a video camera, and then basically there's motion tracking that you can use now that basically brought this object down, and it's just one layer keyed over the background. So it's definitely a hoax. But that's, unfortunately, all of the news media, all the major press picked that image as the one to show everybody. They didn't obviously vet it or look at it too closely, but all of the news media that finally picked that story used number 3, which was the worst one of all. 1 and 2 were cell phone videos.
Guys, the fact that they all used number 3 and everyone is saying it is a hoax, I mean, if one network were using 3 and the others were using a different one, I could just say, well, it's coincidental. But when everyone is using the most obvious hoax of all the videos, I think we have to go beyond coinkydink. You know, I mean, people like to say, well, it's a coinkydink. No, not when everybody's using that footage and nobody's vetting it. And
well, I think that's what happens, too. Like in the news media, someone will pick it up. AP picks it up, or Reuters picks it up, or someone like that. Then everyone grabs it from the other news source and just re-airs. That happens quite a bit. And I've really noticed that happens more than I even anticipated it being. In fact, when I was trying to grab images for Watchers 2, news clippings, short blurbs, half the time I wasn't even sure which network it was, because it would say NHK Japan if I was trying to do the Fukushima thing, and on top of the NHK logo on the lower right hand of the frame it would say CNN, and then up in the right hand it said router. So all of them used it, and they all badged it whether or not they shot it. It was very confusing on who was the originator of it. I'm thinking as far as the Fukushima stuff, it was probably NHK. But anyway, everybody got credit for it. You know, I think that's a little tacky. But anyway.
Well, that was the thing that really, you know, got me, was the badging. Okay. Yeah, and everyone is making it look like they're the apparent source of it and slapping their logo on it. To me, it was kind of cheesy. It was almost as if, to be honest, guys, it came across to me like all of these news sources were told, this is what you use, badge it, and that's it. Don't vet it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it just strikes me as a manipulation.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, to me, the 2 videos that I have trouble calling a hoax completely are videos 1 and 2. Those are very difficult to tell. I mean, they would be easy to hoax if you were doing them because all you can see is a pinpoint of light. But the whole thing to me hung together as far as it being the same luminance level. It didn't look like it was on another layer to me. It just looked like there was something in the frame. You could put it in there yourself, I'm sure, but what if you didn't? So those 2, I don't know, I'd give them a 50-50 personally, that they could be hoaxed or not hoaxed. 3 is a definite hoax. But then when you study cameras 4 and 5 angle, to me those were definite hoaxes. And the reason why is because they didn't match the style of the UFO we saw in 1 and 2, which came out first. The UFOs in 4 and 5 had kind of a horizontal flare through them, and they coasted around over the dome. They didn't just come down and sit over the dome for 22 seconds. They actually shifted horizontally back and forth, and then they had this light glint through them. And even though camera 5 was in a completely different angle, that UFO looked the same. So to me, it looked like the same effects guy had used the same effects on it. And then the 6th one that came out was a close-up shot of a UFO, which was so freaking obviously a 3D, CGI effect.
Animation, right. It
was blatantly obvious that it was an effect. But the thing that, to me, made 4, 5, and 6 all the hoaxes is because 6 had that same horizontal flare through their goofy video shot. So I think, okay, the same guy did the last 3. Right. So we've got 3 as a hoax. I mean, this is my opinion, guys, and I could be wrong.
Well, no, I think, 1 and 2 are credible. You have to be skeptical. The rest of them definitely. And to me, this was kind of like going back to the top of the show when I talked about the optimist and the pessimist and the pony under the pile of poop. And, think about it. You got a pony, which is like the first video. And all of a sudden, maybe there's a second one that comes up and substantiates it. But this sends off a real hair trigger. And I was detecting when I looked at it that same kind of technique. This stuff, first off, this stuff was really coming out pretty fast. It doesn't roll out over a period of time. But I'm seeing that same similarity that you were seeing. And in my mind, what I'm thinking is the first one was authentic, possibly the second. But what we saw with all the subsequent ones is that it was a disinformation effort to just muddle the whole deal altogether. In other words, what was a real event, a real sighting and real video, is now had, you pile enough manure on it. How many people want to dig through the pile to find the pony? Okay? They get a couple of handfuls and they say, that's it, I'm done. Dancing with the stars. And there you go.
Also, it could be YouTubers that just want a lot of hits on their product too, because sometimes you can get paid for that. And I know like videos 1 and 2 got millions of hits. I mean, it's like a stunning amount of views for that, because it was such a significant thing. And Jaime Maussan went over there, I believe, didn't he, LA? Didn't he actually go to Jaime
Maussan tried to vet it, but the guy wouldn't meet with him. But Jaime did find a still, and you know about this, Richard, too, the still shot from a security camera apparently showing the same something over the Dome of the Rock, which appears at the same time. Yeah. So, who knows what that is, but it's at the same time where where video 1 and 2 was taken. So that could be, it's yet a completely different shot, but it shows the light over where the dome is at the same time frame. It's sort of interesting.
And Jaime Maussan is like one of the most respected ufologists there are.
Let me weigh in here a little bit for a second. What's interesting about the Jerusalem UFO to me is it's sort of like a test case, or it may have just been thrown up that way. It's like all of a sudden, it hits the news stream, and everybody, the little green men are back. They all do the same thing. No one in the mainstream media ever treats it with a modicum of seriousness. It's always, the little green men are back again, Bob. Oh, that's right, Ed. It's just ridiculous, and it's a game changer. I mean, it's a game changer. Look, the exopolitic movement, which is worldwide, they're all clamoring, they're all waiting, they want full disclosure. And what we're seeing, I think, by this is it's sort of like let's test the public, let's see how they react. No one gives a flip. As Dr. Roger Lear said in Watchers 1, if something lands near the 101 freeway in Los Angeles and causes a backup, it's not going to be, oh my gosh, it's true, it's real. What are we looking at? Where are these beings from? Are they malevolent or benevolent? No, it's like, hey, how soon can you get this guy off the freeway? I'm late for dinner. And that's the mindset. That's the mindset of so many people they've just been lulled to sleep. Look, I have friends that I try to talk about this stuff to, and I've learned I just clam up. I don't say anything because all I get is the deer in the headlight look. It's like, oh, he's talking about that again. And yet there's a sighting somewhere on this planet, almost one per minute now, somewhere. Somebody's seeing some anomalous object where many of these things turn out to be the usual suspects. You know, the weather balloons and Venus and the swamp gas and all that. But others are not. Others are not. So this is a game changer when it happens, folks.
Another thing that's always disheartening is the video compression that's used on these things at times will affect the way things look to such an extent that you're not sure what you're looking at. And I know, like, there's been times where you'll notice it too, even on DVDs that are like old black and white films and things like that. They're poorly compressed. If they use a lot of compression in the image, even if there were no layers in the image, no compositing done, it's just basically a transfer from film to video, say, you will see stuff shift horizontally in the frame back and forth, like in the background or in the foreground, depending on what luminance or the brightness, the level of the image is. You'll see stuff moving in the frame that really never was moving. And it's all because of MPEG artifacts, compression artifacts. Well, we see that. It's what looks like that stuff going on to me in the UFO number 2 video, because it's compressed so much that we got jiggliness going on that probably really isn't in the actual video if we could ever look at that. I think it's actually JPEG artifacts, MPEG compression going on that's making things move that really aren't moving. You know, so then it makes it look like it could be fake, like you composite something because something's jiggling that shouldn't be jiggling. You know what I'm trying to say? Maybe I'm not explaining this very well, but I'm sure most of you have seen that.
You're finding things. I mean, I was listening to one expert they had on TV, and he said, well, the camera's going in and out of focus. So that's proof that it's a hoax. And, you know, I've taken cell phone pictures at night. I mean, the cell phone has a heck of a time focusing. You know, and literally all you have to do is move your hand just an iota, just as you're breathing. Just the normal act of breathing is enough to make that camera really work hard. And usually with the cell phones, you're talking about a camera that's a cheap plastic lens. It's going to be smeared because you're handling it. It's got, skin oil on it. And it'll be smeared up many times. So it's
whatever lens was in your pocket to be stuck on it. I mean, it's just like
that's right.
Million things. And there's only a few cell phones that have really decent video cameras. I mean, the new Sanyo looks really good, and of course the iPhone is really high resolution images, and HTC I think has a really good. You know, some of these camera phones have more megapixels than the early digital cameras you go out and buy. It's pretty amazing, and they're actually recording 720p video in your cell phone now. So. In fact, I believe the image that I keyed in behind your head in Watchers 2, Marshall, since you're in the program too, there was a video of some orbs that were seen over Japan, and it was all captured in high def, but on a cell phone, and it's very clear. I mean, it's an amazing picture. In fact, I was kind of shocked to see a UFO video that crisp, because they're usually like horrible.
Yeah, they're usually grainy. Yeah,
or out of focus, or you're all bloomed out so you can't really tell what it is. You know, it's like all those things.
Yeah, you know, and guys, there's to move on to another question. This is one that really is funny. I want to read this to you. It comes from the chat room from Hula Hula. That's a long username. It's questions. Sumerians believe that Nibiru will show up between Mars and Jupiter. Is that your opinion, or do you have any other information on this Sumerian prediction? The reason why I thought that to be interesting, let me throw this out and then jump it over to you guys, is that there was the Milk Hill 2009 formation, as I believe Milk Hill in England, and it's the sextant, very large formation, like Avebury 2008 that I document in Crossing the Cusp. It formed in 2 parts, and it shows an object, a very large object, about, say, 2/3 the size of Jupiter, between Jupiter and Mars in this completed formation. And, of course, there's all kinds of gobbledygook explanation to find, oh, this comet will be kind of in that area of space, or this comet will be in that kind of area of space. But I find that the formation showing it between the orbit of Mars and Jupiter it's consistent with what we've been seeing for a decade in our research, and also ancient accounts where it's documented in books like the Colburn Bible. This object is not something that hits us, it comes that close to us. It's going to pass a planet or two away from us. And yes, Zecharia Sitchin said it would pass between Mars and Jupiter. With that, let me throw it to you guys and get your feelings on it. Who wants to go first?
I'll take it.
All right.
What's interesting, what's interesting about the whole, again, Nibiru Sumerian legends, and I've been asked this a lot, and with all due respect to, Sitchin and the Sumerians and everything else, and they talk about this and this Planet X, Nibiru, whatever. Something is coming. I mean, I will agree with them on that in that respect. But here's the deal: the Sumerians don't have this thread of prophecy, which goes through for thousands of years by different authors, whereas the prophecies that I adhere to do. And so there's a huge difference. We're looking at sort of like one event, and I realize it can also segue into my own calendar. Some people are doing that. But what's interesting about this is, could it be that I'm just throwing a monkey wrench in here, something may happen, but what it seems to do to most people is obfuscate what I would consider real prophecy, and that's what certainly Watchers 2 is based on, the fact that we're seeing wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, famines, pestilence, and troublesome times, which was written, over 2,000 years ago, and here we are. So it's like with Planet X, which may in fact be a real event. I'm not saying it's not. Something's out there. I mean, we keep hearing and getting it from too many sources. No one really knows what it is yet, but sooner or later we're going to find out, won't we? At some point it will become self-evident to what we're dealing with. What it's done, and this is where I don't take umbrage, that's too strong of a word, but I would caution people, okay, look at that, understand what that is, but don't let it obfuscate this other prophecy, which is, in my opinion, on overtime, like a freight train running on steroids. This thing is like flying down the tracks and not stopping. So there's a big difference in which one I really adhere to and really keep close monitor of.
So for you, it's all the cards are on the table. It's just which ones you want to hold in your hand.
Bingo.
Okay. Richard?
Well, I think I've begun to think that all of the ancient prophecies from multiple sources, and so people don't get upset. I think we're trying to proselytize people by always using the Bible as a form of ancient text, but there seem to be many others as well as the scriptures corroborating with that, which we tried to point out in Watchers 2. I have a rabbi friend by the name of Rabbi Perry who wrote a book on the Talmud, and the Talmud is an 1,800-year-old text that the Jews use that has some very prophetic things in it. They also have something called the Kabbalah. Madonna is very actively involved in Kabbalistic things. There's the Zohar and the Midrash. All of these ancient texts are centuries old, thousands of years old, some older than others, and they're not considered scripture as much as they are kind of like a diary, a third-party view of what was going on during the time of the Torah, when the Torah was written. Quite often that's the case. Mm-hmm. Just as like I would compare them loosely, I don't want to get in trouble here by saying something out of place, but I would loosely compare them to what you're distributing, Marshall, the Colburn Bible, as being a diary of sorts of what was going on in Egypt 3,300 years ago, which I think is very valuable information. I read that, and to me, it reads like an authentic text to me. Like, okay, well, this isn't scripture, but this is someone's point of view, and for some reason, we're allowed to read it now, which I think is kind of interesting. So all these texts seem to indicate that the Earth has been destroyed once or more times in the past, in our distant past. And when you then when you start reading even Old Testament things, the book of Ezekiel, I think it's chapter 26, talks about a land being covered with thick waters, and never to be found again. And also it talks about the ancient waste places of the earth. And to me, it sounds like it's talking about Atlantis or something that's sinking and being covered by the ocean. And, you know, they found, like, I don't know, some 2,500 cities under the water that are, you know, under almost a mile of water, have been under there for thousands of years. So how did they get under there? What caused that? What happened? Those things, you know, maybe the Earth isn't this real peaceful, calm planet everybody thinks it is. Maybe things do happen every so often. And to me, that's interesting. And it's also very sobering. It's like, what the heck's going on now? So the thing with Planet X, I think it, you know, especially it's hard to discount it, the whole theory, after having read the Immanuel Velikovsky book, Worlds in Collision, because it's so well researched and so highly documented. And while all of his theories may not totally jive, his basic theories are pretty solid, I think.
Yes. I mean, Velikovsky, boy, talk about repression. He came out, and even Carl Sagan, who had been the lead guy to attack those theories, really felt bad about the way Velikovsky was treated because, man, it was heavy-handed. You had the intelligentsia, they went into the publishers and distributors and said, you know what, you guys sell this book, we're not buying your textbooks. I mean, it was just totally abusive, totally repressive, but yet there's got to be a kernel of truth that it keeps coming back. Same thing with Tesla. You know, Tesla's genius is undeniable, and I think right now there are more people that know the history of Tesla than, you know, Edison and the other great inventors, because he really did impact our world. I mean, you know, AC and Tesla coils, you can't drive down the road in a car without having a Tesla coil. So you have these thinkers. And while we were talking, there was one question that popped up with one of the folks in the virtual room about the galactic rift going through the center of the galaxy, the plane of the galaxy. And because now it's widely held that our galaxy, the pinwheel nature of our galaxy is that there's a black hole at the center, and that when we pass through the galactic rift, we're going to go through that event horizon, the plane of that event horizon. And that could have all kinds of effects. Now, other guests that I've had on my other show, Cut to the Chase, have maintained that this is an area of space where young suns are more likely than in other places to go supernova. So there's something that happens there. If you look at the Mayan calendar, the timing of the calendar, you look at a lot of other prophecies, I mean, the galactic rift could be a reset point. It could, if it's going to do that, then it's going to affect every other body that's out there, including a Planet X. So that introduces
do you remember
a variable.
Stephen Hawking? Sorry, Marshall.
Go ahead.
You remember Stephen Hawking called a press conference a few years ago, excitedly, and it was to talk about that he wanted to let everyone know that he felt like objects passing through a black hole would not be destroyed. Remember that? And everybody, all the scientists were sitting in there and said, he's called us here to tell us that? Why the urgency? And I thought that was interesting. You know, why did you call a press conference?
It wasn't the comment, it was the urgency given to it that was odd.
Yeah, he was very urgent. He wanted to reveal his findings because he had been studying black holes and felt that, you know, there were all these crazy theories about black holes, that you'd be stretched into like a cord or something, and everything would be destroyed, and you'd be coming out in another dimension on the other side, and all of these things. And he said that in his press conference that objects passing through a black hole would not be destroyed. That was the crux of his study. And then in Watchers 2, we interviewed a really brilliant guy named Chuck Misler, who says that all this black hole stuff is just nonsense. that really the scientific community is ignoring the fact that, you know, that the universe is 99% ionized gas, and so that the universe is electrical, and that things respond electrically. And you can't assume gravity is affecting everything when it's so far away that there's no real effect to the gravitational pull. It's something else. He said if people really understand Newtonian theory, they'd realize that it couldn't do what they're saying it's doing. So I thought that was interesting as well. So
yeah, I mean, the debate rages on. L.A., in terms of the galactic rift, what are you seeing out there that
let me
connects the dots with anything you're doing?
Yeah, it does actually. I'm working on a book called The Cosmic Chess Match. Will be out sometime this summer, which addresses the Mayan prophecy and the galactic rift and the whole deal. And this is like really a 2-hour conversation, and hopefully we'll get back and be able to do it more justice when the book comes out. But it's the idea that
you bet we will. You bet.
Absolutely. But let me just cut to the chase, which is the title of one of your shows, and just give you the bottom line here. Could it be that this is sort of like a key in a lock as we go through, and entities which have been sealed in what I would call the abyss, the abusa in the Greek, will be set free during this time, and that these beings, who they're very benevolent beings, but they're also very highly malevolent beings, know this. In other words, they can see the future, not exhaustively, but they can certainly see the future further than we can. The analogy I use in the book is what I've come to call the cornfield analogy. If Marshall, if the three of us are standing in a cornfield and the corn's 8 feet tall, guess what? We see the corn in front of us. That's it. That's it. That's all we see. We don't see anything else, just the corn in front of us. Well, that's how we perceive time in a linear fashion, 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, and on it goes. Well, what if an entity drives into the cornfield in a big red fiery fire truck and with an extension ladder and climbs to the top of this 2-story extension ladder? Guess what? His view of the cornfield is not only the cornfield, but maybe the cornfield after that. So an entity, in fact, would have a greater view of time than we do, because he's in another dimension. And then let's say there's a third entity who's in the space shuttle with a telescopic lens that can look down at any point of the planet and yet zoom back and see it all at once. That's his perspective of time. He can see all of time at a glance. So it's a way for a finite mind to grab different perspectives of time. That being said, if let's say this war has been going on in the cosmos literally for thousands of years, which I believe it has, it's about to spill over into our time frame, which again was prophesied. All the signs are here that this war is about to spill over. These are the signs which lead up to the spilling over from this other dimension into this dimension. So could it be that the 2012 galactic rift, when we're in that, and is the alleged black hole, could it be in fact a key in a lock which releases and allows full access into this dimension from another? It's just an interesting question. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. It's something I've thought long and hard about, and I do address this in the Cosmic Chess Match.
Oh, we are definitely going to do that, but we are so going to do that book. You bet, when that comes out. Guys, we've got a caller, and let me bring this caller in. Hello, caller. Welcome to Planet X Special Report. And who are you? Where are you from?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we hear you, caller. Yes, now, if you
Hi.
have your player on, you might want to turn that off so you don't get confused during the call. And then you can turn your player back on for the rest of the show.
I'm having a hard time, but can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I've been listening to Coast. I've been following your work for a good while, and I remember the hoax date that Nancy Leader had set up in 2003 about Planet X coming in, and a lot of people were like a little boy who cried wolf, like, oh, forget it, there's no Planet X, that was just a big hoax. But then I've been continuing to follow Planet X research, and I remembered hearing Richard C. Hoagland on Coast a few years ago say that planet, I think Saturn, was heating up and that it was affecting the heat of the other planets. And so I was wondering what you guys wanted to say about this.
That it's, are you saying, yeah. Could you rephrase that again? Because you chopped a little for us.
Okay, sorry. Okay, okay, I know that NASA is one of the alphabet agencies that is, you can't really totally trust what they put out. One of the, these controllers. So I don't. So in my research group, the moderator says, "Oh yeah, well, let's just go to NASA." And I'm like, "Give me a break, NASA? You're going to get the truth from NASA? That's like get the truth from, the guy head of the IMF. Okay, all right. So
that's right.
So all right. Okay.
Marshall, can I jump in here? I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just weigh in here for a second. Here's the deal. In Watchers 2, the title of Watchers 2 is called Signs in the Heavens and Earth. And this is what I was trying to get to when you asked me about the Sumerian prophecy. This is just one event It may be a game changer. We don't know yet. It'll become self-evident. But it's only one event. It's only one card that's on the table, to use Marshall's analogy. There are so many other cards right now that are being played. Look at Panel X. Check it out. Keep looking at it. But also understand that these other prophecies are actually affecting us right now as we speak. The prophecies that were being fulfilled and were fulfilled last summer and are ongoing, and Marshall knows exactly where I'm going with this, as of course does Richard, my partner and good friend. But you get 500 fires in Russia, the flooding in Pakistan, all the different disasters that are happening on the planet, and it's affecting commodities. It's affecting the food prices. The food prices are what touched off the riots in Tunisia this spring, which then mushroomed into what is now known as the Arab Spring. I also, being a supernaturalist, believe that there were supernatural triggers to the so-called Arab Spring. It's not a food thing, but see, it's all connected. It's all completely interconnected. And these prophecies are happening right under our noses. So, yeah, look at Planet X, understand about that. But I would say broaden your view and understand that these other prophecies, which are written thousands of years ago, are now beginning to be fulfilled in real time, right here, right now.
Okay. And we have someone else that's...
touch upon that too, Marshall. Okay. 15 seconds?
Sure. And while you're doing that, let me, we've got someone else down here that's called in. So go for it, and then we'll see if they've got a question.
Sure. No, I was recently interviewed on Network 10 in Australia about all of this stuff. And Network 10 is CBS Network for Australia. And in that process, I ended up talking with their producers because they had just experienced the Queensland flood. And one of the producers there had said, you know, someone ran through the newsroom saying there's a wall of water coming to wash the town away. And he thought it was a joke. And they looked on their monitors and, oh, my gosh, this is real. And cars were, like, being swept downstream like corks. And it was just, like, an amazing thing. And he's written me a few times since the show, just to stay in connection, saying that he's having trouble sleeping at night. And on that show, I mentioned that I feel like this whole end of days scenario that seems to be playing out right before our eyes from ancient prophecies and everything else, Planet X, you name it, is a much more complex tapestry of things than I had ever expected it to be, because it's a combination of geopolitical forces as well as Earth and astronomical changes going on. I mean, it's everything. Everything is going, and we're talking about could Planet X be perturbing the other planets? Well, I don't know the reason for all of those things that have been happening unless something like that was happening, because we have Saturn having storms we've never seen before, gigantic storms. We've seen Jupiter physically lose a stripe. I mean, that's what would cause that to happen? Yeah, we've seen the Martian ice caps melting. We've seen Pluto more luminous in brightness because it's heating up. And then the Earth and the Moon flipping over, all of these things, and then the Sun acting really strangely on top of everything else. It's like, how much more evidence do you need that something's going on? And it's bigger than our experience.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Guys, let me see if we got this caller here. Hold on. Caller from the 618, are you there? Hello, caller from the 618. Okay, obviously didn't work.
Lost in the bowels of Blog Talk Radio.
Lost in the bowels of Blog Talk Radio, yes. When you folks call in, you got to let me know. You'll get an option when you call in on the call-in number. That'll flag it that if you want to come on in and talk. And remember, that call-in number is 1-818-495-6962. And, you know, let's, in the remaining time here, one thing I'd like to do is, for those of you who have seen Watchers 1, Richard, what are they going to see new in Watchers 2?
Well, Watchers 1 was basically a video about the UFO phenomena, and that's something that's always intrigued me, and L.A. Marzulli is a consummate expert on the subject. And we both kind of go after it with the same mindset here. We both think we understand what's going on to some extent. Not that we have all the answers, but we're pretty much agreement in our worldview of what this is. Well, Watchers 2, we discussed the topic for Watchers 2, and I said, well, you know, you wrote this book, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, and it showed kind of how political events and ancient texts and UFO phenomenon, all that seem to be merging together to create a result that causes these ancient texts to really come alive. And I said, what if we did Watchers 2 about all of these changes that are happening to the Earth and also unexplained events that no one seems to be addressing? And so we thought that would be a fun project. Well, it was a horrendous job. Let me tell you, it was an enormous amount of work to put this thing together. And of course, LA did a fantastic job stitching it all together. And I didn't even know where we were going with it. And we had topics laid out. We had a basic outline for the whole video when we started. And we had to change that radically because as we were making the video, things kept happening. And it was hard for us to keep up with the events. I mean, just since we started the video, Egypt became in turmoil. Mubarak was thrown out. Libya went unstable. Yemen went unstable. I mean, it was just one country after another. And then we started having earthquakes. With a 9.0 Fukushima event, we had the Australian floods. All of those things happened during the production of Watchers 2. So wow. It was really interesting because a friend of mine, Don Eland, went to Japan just afterwards, and I said, well, be careful because there's a lot of radioactivity floating around there. But he went to kind of almost like as a missionary to help the people there, and he said he's never seen such devastation. And we have a guy, and he filmed some stuff just so that I could use it in Watchers 2, right on site there in Japan with a really good camera. And he interviewed this man who's in our piece that says, from the coast to 2 miles inland, all up and down the island of Japan, it's just, he says, just a pile of garbage. It's completely devastated. And you walk through that area, and it's just cars on top of themselves and splintered wood. And, I mean, it's just like junk. I mean, how they're going to get rid of it. And Don told me, he said, one day we'd be driving down this street, and he said there'd be 50 cars all lined up, hulks, car bodies that had been torn up by the tsunami, all crunched and full of water and cracked and broken. And he said the next day they'd already cleared them all out. He said they just had been working like at an incredible pace to put their country back together. But then on top of all that, they've got this enormous nuclear event happening. I mean, it's worse than we're being told about. They've actually had, I don't know how many meltdowns. Maybe Lynn has some further.
Reactor 1 melted down within the first, 14 hours of the event. I mean,
right. We know there were 4 reactors, but if we had how many meltdowns have occurred? I really don't know the answer to that.
Well, we don't know. They're not being forthright. I mean, they're is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? We don't know, and they're not being forthcoming with the information, which is really
and the management over there seems. Yeah, and the management over there, it's like the gang that couldn't shoot straight. The thing that I find really, really frightening about Fukushima was the fact that the guys that built this thing just were so completely blindsided. So when this catastrophe happens, they don't even have a hypothesis to work from. Forget a plan B. Like somebody scratching something on a cocktail napkin. They didn't even have a cocktail napkin. I mean, they're just, inventing this as they go along. It turned into a big science experiment. Gee, really great when the fallout comes our way. That's nice to think. That's part of the experiment, too.
And, of course, what's interesting is I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just said it's a very old reactors. They were built in the 70s, and they were put right on the coast.
We have the same reactors in this country.
We do.
Yeah.
In Watchers 2, we show a list of them. And we actually have a nuclear engineer that I met in Hollywood and talked with for a couple hours and thought he was really fascinating, and he wanted to be in our show to talk about Fukushima, which I thought was great. But basically, as we were talking kind of privately, it's like they did so many things wrong in Japan. I mean, it's a stunning number of things. He said, normally, when you have hydrogen buildup in those reactor buildings, you're supposed to neutralize it by pumping nitrogen in there. And they all 4 blew up. It's like, hey, guys, hello.
It's not working.
That didn't have to happen.
Yeah, I mean, what else did he say? I mean, we've heard the experts. All I can think of right now is General Electric as a company is vastly superior at evading U.S. taxes than it is at building nuclear reactors. I mean, their accounting is fabulous. The engineering, not so good. But, you said about the nitrogen gas. Were there other insider views of Fukushima? Because the reason why I'm asking is
absolutely.
Next week I've got Eihan Derave coming on. He just returned from Japan. He was there on a humanitarian relief. For our listeners out there, you can go. It's in the next up show. And there's actually a link there to, he's got a private video. It's out of Japan. And I'd say watch that before the server gets so hammered he loses the account. But he had in this video something that just stunned me. It was a complete fishing trawler, about 100 foot long. And about the size of the ship remember that submarine that hit that trawler off the coast of Hawaii and it sank? Mm-hmm. And then they lifted it up? It's just about exactly the same size as that. And this thing
surfaced rapidly and hit the thing.
Right. They surfaced and hit it. Well, I mean, he's on a motorcycle. Somebody loaned him a motorcycle to go back and explore around. And he's actually, he's got a video helmet, an HD video helmet, and you see this ship, and it's in absolutely pristine condition, not a scratch on it, except it is sitting way up in a narrow gorge, miles away from the sea, and along with a whole lot of other junk. But what amazed me in that video was he's out there. I mean, he got a truck with survival supplies, a lot of different supplies that were provided, and he's driving into the areas that are having low-level radiation, and these people are so afraid to go indoors. They're living in these little makeshift tent cities, and it's cold. It's snowing.
Yeah,
and
it's winter there.
But he's interviewing them, and their stoic courage is just amazing. I mean, they're sitting there cooking basic stuff, on propane burners with a big smile. This is it. Hey, we're alive. Life is good. We're in the tents. We're getting colds and flus. So what? We're alive. The way those people hold on to it. But, I mean, I'm watching that. And then I am thinking about La Palma, all right? And if the flank of that older volcano collapses, and it's just a couple of geologists are warning us that that's exactly what's happening, it could send a wall of water towards the east coast as high as 900 meters. And
there was a History Channel show about that, I think.
There's been a
very viable theory. It's not a crazy theory at all.
No, and it was one that was the tourist bureau over there just got on their high horse and started shooting holes in it and saying, oh, no, it's wonderful here. Come, the flank's not going to collapse. It's all nonsense. Well, if you watch, the History Channel show, there's the guy showing you where the earth is torn. I mean, excuse me, we're right back to can I believe my lying eyes or not? And which, that is the hardest thing. People just don't want to believe their lying eyes. And so the thing with Fukushima that really troubles me, particularly for over here, is that there's a dearth of reporting as to what, if anything, that they're doing to secure the nuclear reactors we have lining our east and west coast. Are you guys seeing any information on that?
No, I haven't seen anything other than the exact same reactors that were built in Fukushima are all up and down the east coast and even Mexico. I mean, exactly the same type of reactor.
About a month ago, I was driving down to have a meeting near Oceanside and happened to be driving right by the San Onofre nuclear power plant. And, it's sitting kind of like on the beach almost. It's like, I guess no one had expected tsunamis. That was just so unimaginable in the days when these things were built. And probably the Fukushima reactor could have withstanded a 9.0 earthquake. It might have had some rafters fall in or some of the superstructure collapse, but it wouldn't have affected the reactor vessel or any of the real key components. The cooling ponds for the spent fuel and all of that would have remained intact. But what happened that really took the thing apart was that they mounted all of their pumps in a basement level underneath the reactor area, from what I understand, and that was immediately swamped by the tsunami. So all of these gigantic pumps were completely submerged, and then the power leading to them also snapped. So basically, all of the power and pumpage necessary to cool the spent fuel rods and all of that stuff, all of the reactor workings, stopped. And that's really what caused Fukushima to come apart at the seams. That nothing was being cooled, and stuff started coming apart at the seams really rapidly. And that could happen pretty much anywhere in the world. But my gosh, the footprint of radiation from Fukushima is huge. And they're talking about an Olympic-sized swimming pool full of highly radioactive water, and they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And my concern is if there's a massive aftershock over there, hello, we're back to Funville.
Well, the
one thing that Robert,
continued.
Yes, they did, and they're massive. I mean, there's one in Watchers 2 that we showed.
On a daily basis, almost, there's aftershocks.
Yeah. What was that? Well, it was 7.5, I think, was the shock.
Yeah, I mean, a 7.5 is just off the charts. I mean, people don't realize that. They look at that number and they go, oh, just 7.5, that's nothing. Are you kidding me? 7.5 is nasty.
Here's what
I know.
Like.
I was in Loma Prieta. You know, I mean, I know what that one was like, and that was. Man, that was just completely amazing. I mean, I remember in that quake just seeing asphalt, parking lot, like waves on the ocean.
Yeah.
And trees, you know, flipping back and forth, like windshield wiper blades.
Right.
So, and that was no 7.5. And the thing of it is it's also duration.
The guy was telling about Don, my friend who went over there to help people in Japan, was in a bunk bed. And he had his friend Rod, I think was his name, who was waking him up in the morning, just kind of like jiggling his mattress a little bit to wake him up. Well, one morning, Don said that his mattress was really being jiggled, like up and down and up and down. And he got kind of upset. He got up and said, "Hey, Rob, cut it out. You know, it's like, knock it off." And he thought he'd sat up, and there was nobody there. It was the earthquake doing that. They had an aftershock of 6.5 while he was there, and he was laying in his bunk bed and realized it felt like someone actually picking his mattress up and shaking it around by hand.
Wakey, wakey.
But what I wanted to tell you quickly, Robert, the engineer that I was telling you about, that's in Watchers 2, told me that he had worked at one time on nuclear submarines. So he's well aware of the differences between, this is pretty key here at this point I'm about to make. There's a big difference between the military, the way they handle nuclear power issues, and basically the consumer base. People here in the States or that are held by private companies that are manufacturing power. In a military situation, if you have to scram the reactor, you can do that without losing your job, because you think there's you're trying to avert a meltdown or something major happening on a submarine. And even if you're wrong and do it, you might be reprimanded, but you're not going to lose your job over it. But he said, when it comes to...
I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave the show on that. We've just run out of time. Folks,
sorry.
On Watchers 2, when it comes out, I'm going to have a special promotion on
Blog Talk Radio.
Up to 2012, there must be books that...
Now, lady, you want to... Well, the reason that neither one of us know which one to talk first, because it's a team effort. I couldn't have done it without L.A., and he's a marvelous host and talent and intellect on this program. And we decided we wanted to put a program together that would discuss and show and demonstrate the things that were happening around the world, all the earth changes and ancient prophetic texts that seem to be being fulfilled in our lifetimes. And once we got started in it, it kept unfolding and unfolding and unfolding, and we didn't know where it was going to stop. And it opened up a bunch of very interesting things that we didn't even know we were going to explore until after we got started.
Wow. You know, that reminds me of that great joke about the optimist and the pessimist. You ever hear that one, guys? They get this boy, two boys, one's an eternal pessimist, one's an eternal optimist, and first off they take the pessimist into a room, and it's piled high to the ceiling with toys of every imaginable kind. And this kid just takes them all apart and just says, this is last year, this is the wrong color, this has got a problem, finds problems with everything. Then they go to the optimist, and they take him into another room. And in the center of the room is this 10-foot high pile of steamy hot horse manure. And the first thing this kid does is he scrambles up to the heap of the manure and starts digging for all he can. I mean, there's manure flying everywhere. And they stop him and they say, what are you doing that for? And he said, you know, with this much manure, there's got to be a pony down there. Now, let me ask you guys, what are you guys finding here? Have you found a pony?
No, L.A.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. What the pony is simply this, in my opinion. And let me add to what Richard's opening statement was. It was definitely a team effort. Richard and I are partners on Watchers 1 and certainly on Watchers 2, and hopefully we'll get to Watchers 3 at some point. But it was a team effort, and it's just amazing what we uncovered. And I think what we uncovered was the fulfillment of ancient prophetic texts, which have sort of laid dormant for thousands of years, and for the most part really neglected by most people. I mean, most people, know about the American Idol and who's there, or Lindsay Lohan going to jail, or the antics of O.J. Simpson, or just Donald Trump not running for president. But most people don't study and sort of blow the dust off some of these ancient texts. And what we found, much to our astonishment, was that first of all, these texts are very deliberate. They're very in your face. In other words, you can look at the ancient writings there and interpret them without the need of an interpreter. When a person looks at Nostradamus, with all due respect to Nostradamians, it's like, well, they're kind of fuzzy quatrains, not sure it could mean anything. When we hear wars, rumors of wars, famines and pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, and troublesome times, and we use that sort of as our mantle to cover Watchers 2, lo and behold, that's exactly what we find. In unprecedented ways. And certainly the numbers, I think, speak for themselves with the amount of earthquakes and earth changes that we're seeing. And there's a line sort of that we keep coming back to time. Is it business as usual or something more? And I think both Richard and I certainly agree that it is something more.
So then you guys are you coming to this as optimists or as pessimists? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that would say, well, it's doom and gloom, all right? But that doesn't sound like what you guys are doing here.
Well, no, what we're just trying to do is present the pieces of the puzzle and let the viewer put it together in any way that he chooses to. We just wanted to present the facts, just to lay them out there. But there definitely is something going on.
And
go ahead, Lynn.
If I can add one thing. I think I think we make a point that something is going on that seems to be related to these ancient texts, which immediately begs the question to the curious mind, gee, if these things were written down, who the heck wrote them? And, whoever wrote them, is this, whatever it is it benevolent or malevolent? Can we trust it? Is there more? And that's what we're trying to just gently kind of expose and say, hey, it's like, this was written, some of the stuff 2,000 years ago, other prophecies 2,600 years ago, and yet we see that the specificity is lining up in today's world. What's going on here, folks? Is someone outside the space-time continuum who can somehow see the future and call it out well in advance before it happens? How the heck do they do that? So I just find that's really fascinating.
Well, we know about the Bible prophecies, but there's also the Torah code angle, which is a new twist for a lot of people in terms of Bible prophecy. And so what are you finding there, Richard?
Well, it just seems to be continuing to unfold with new and even more startling discoveries all the time. And one thing that was rather chilling today, I worked for the past 24 hours with Rabbi Glazerson, who had a discovery of a Torah code that was so incredible that he flew in from New York just to meet with me. I said, this must be really important for him to come in just to spend 2 days together.
So give it to us. Give it to us.
Yeah. You might remember, for those of you who already are familiar with the Torah codes, there's a code in the first 5 books of the Old Testament known as the Torah. It's called equidistant letter sequencing. Basically, it's just that you skip a certain amount of characters and it spells out words. Well, this has been perfected now over the past 25 years by a bunch of rabbis and professors, primarily in Jerusalem and New York, of which I know most of the world experts that do this and are good friends with all of them at this point. It's something I never expected or anticipated. But back on September 12th of 2001, the day after the attack on the Twin Towers, Eliyahu Refs, who's basically considered the discoverer of the computer Torah codes, came up with a table that talked about the towers and bin Laden and all of that, and In the background, what often happens in Torah codes that most people don't know is there's something called the plain text. And the plain text is just the actual scripture that's in the background that normally you don't pay any attention to. Well, all of the codes, Twin Tower, terrorism, all of that, all built like a little crossword puzzle over this scripture that said, and 3,000 men died, or words to that effect. And basically, it's the scripture in the book of Genesis where it talks about Sodom and Gomorrah and how all of the approximately that many men died. Well, what was interesting, all of the codes for the Twin Towers ended up appearing superimposed over that text. And we didn't know for, I don't know, what was it, guys, 2 months or so after 9/11, how many people actually were murdered.
Right.
But it turned out to be something like 2,998 or 97 people.
Mm-hmm.
So practically 3,000 people. So meanwhile, the Torah code told us the day after how many people would be killed. And then what was really interesting is that they found a Bin Laden code a while back. It happens to be in Torah code promo that's on your website, Marshall. And it said, you know, Bin Laden, destruction, you know, it says, you know, the Messiah will revenge, you know, all of that. Well, in that same table, Rabbi Glazerson found a slew of other related words, and it said, surely he will be shot in 5771, which is this year. All of those words just appeared. And then in the plain text under all of that, they discovered it said, murderer will murder, murderer, 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 over and over, called him a murderer. And then it had a note about it's just there were so many Bin Laden notes and paraphrase it, and I should send you the completed table because we just finished it, and it took literally 3 pages, 3 screens of the computer edited together in Photoshop to see the whole table because it was so enormous. It was just like stunning. And then we found
how often do you see
table.
something like this, Rick? How often do you see it?
We've never seen a table this large.
So Bin Laden gets big play.
He got
Does
big
it mention
play.
anything? Does it mention anything about a possible successor?
No, it doesn't. But what's interesting is, here's the most interesting thing, and I asked Glazerson that something he hadn't thought of either. And we always are bouncing ideas off of each other. And Glazerson is a world expert in ancient Hebrew. But both he and Professor Herlick had sent me tables on the Japan nuclear crisis. And one of them said meltdown, Japan, 5771 this year, and all of that. And we had seen those tables before. So then he started telling me how many times in the Torah the word destruction appeared in relation to Japan. And it was only one time, and it all was about the nuclear disaster that they're having. So I said, that's it? There are no others? He said, no. I said, does this mean that we're coming to the end of what things are going to be destroyed? And it's something that we hadn't, neither one of us thought about, because the Torah code always just seemed endless before. But now it's like, that's it.
That's it.
So
but Lynn, are you seeing correlations to this?
It was rather chilling.
What was that question?
Are you seeing correlations to this elsewhere in any other ancient texts?
Well, look, I would say that all of this dovetails together absolutely and is weaving a very grim tapestry. But nonetheless, that's where we are. I mean, I wish we weren't here. I mean, I wish we were talking about Winnie the Pooh or something, but we're not. I mean, this stuff is real. That's the whole point of Watchers 2, is to shake people, wake people up. It's an hour long, and it's just packed with so much information. And what we're trying to show is that, guys, it's not business as usual. We are in unprecedented times. When we just start hopping around the world, and we sort of do this in Watchers 2, although certainly in a much different way than what we're doing here. But when we look at, let's just say last summer, we start off with the 500 fires in Russia, which impacts the grain, which impacts the commodities, the 1,000-year flooding in Pakistan. We look at the droughts in India. We look at the droughts in Africa. We look at the tsunami in Japan, or the flood of biblical proportions, CNN's words, not mine, in Australia. We look at the Christchurch earthquake, the Haitian earthquake. There's still 1 million people living in tents. The Chilean earthquake. And we hear like the Earth has been moved off its axis. Magnetic north has shifted. The anomalies of the moon. We see thousands of birds and fish just dying. You know, pods of dolphins, hundreds of whales, millions upon millions of fish washing up here in Southern California, and on it goes. And look, I'm 60 years old. I've lived on the planet a while. I've never seen anything like this. It's one thing to see one event. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, but they're still cleaning up from the BP oil spill, which is certainly a troublesome time. I actually had a prophetic vision of that weeks before it happened, and then watched it on the news. About fell out of my chair. It was exactly what I had dreamt. I don't get a lot of these. I've only had two, and one was the BP oil spill. The other one was some sort of flooding of Southern California, which has not happened yet either. So we'll see what happens with that. But we start plugging in like the volcanic. I'm sorry,
Lynn. Anything on with Mississippi? I mean, now we're flooding towns to save cities.
There you go.
I mean, I've never seen this.
I've never seen anything like it ever.
Yeah, we're about to say rivers. We're seeing it flowing backwards as the tributaries can no longer feed into it, and it's just kind of spilling out over the land now.
Yeah, I've spoken to several people up and down the river, and it's nasty. I mean, it's really, really nasty. And it's just like over the weekend, the third Intifada happened. I blogged about it on my blog all last week. All last week I dedicated the whole week because of the Arab Spring and the uprising and how all this, the prophecies of ancient texts hinge around Israel, believe it or not. And one of the things I noticed that the media didn't cover anything about the Intifada until Sunday. And then all of a sudden it became front page news for about the 12 hours, and then it just sort of went away. What most people don't understand, nothing has gone away. It's only just kind of reared back and retreated. At some point they will go at it, and who knows how horrific it will be. But it's nasty, and all this was prophesied literally thousands of years ago. It's mind-numbing, mind-blowing to actually turn on the news and sit there and go, oh my gosh, I'm looking at something that was written 2,600 years ago, and here it is, and in living color in my living room. It's not business as usual.
I asked Glazerson about the Intifada. Of course, Glazerson is a rabbi. He's the guy I've been telling you about that's an ancient text expert. And I said, so what about the Intifada? What about that? And he said, oh, the Kabbalah speaks of that all the time. I said, what does the Kabbalah say? He said, it's the continuing and ongoing battle between Ishmael and Israel, Ishmael being the Arabs. I mean, this is something that hasn't changed in thousands of years.
This is the mother of all Hatfield and McCoy kind of situations.
Yeah.
It's a great way to put it.
You got that right.
I mean, it's going on.
The moon anomaly was something that we had, that LA and I had just started on the project, and then it kind of happened. I noticed that you had sent a note to everyone today about the moon anomaly, and that's something that really captured my attention. I couldn't understand what was going on, and no one was discussing it.
What caught my attention with the moon anomaly more than the anomaly itself, which to me was stunning, the videography